Hey folks, we are going live from the Leadnow office here in Toronto. I'm Caitlin. I'm a campaigner with Leadnow. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes to let some folks have a chance to join us. And then we are going to be talking about voting reform, which is really exciting. So yeah, we are just going to give it a few minutes and then we're going to chat about Leadnow's new campaign on proportional representation. Thank you so much for being here with us today. So today's actually a really big day. It is the 1-year anniversary of the day that the Liberals made a promise to make every vote count. And yeah, it was 1 year ago today, which is hard to believe. We were starting to get into the height of election season, and the Liberals released their platform and said that they would be making 2015 the last election under first past the post, which was really exciting. So yeah, we are here now a year later, and we are working with, the Leadnow community is working with groups across the country to make that promise actually come true. So we're really excited to talk to you today about our voting reform campaign and take some questions about proportional representation, about voting reform, and about all the different sort of like things that come along with that. And yeah, we're not going to get, just to sort of like set some expectations, we know that there's like a lot that could be said about voting reform, and it's it's a topic that you could go pretty deep into if you wanted to. So we're not really going to get super far in the weeds on the different types of voting systems today. What we just wanted to do was give you a brief overview of what proportional representation is and why we, the Leadnow community, are supporting it. And then we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions if you have any questions about what PR is, or about why Leadnow is running this campaign, or anything else that kind of comes to mind. I'll do my best to answer those questions. If it's a question about something that's kind of more detailed or more in the weeds, we're probably just going to send you some resources, and we'll be doing more of these videos as the summer goes on. So definitely won't be the last opportunity to ask more questions about this kind of thing. But yeah, we will do our best to try to kind of clear things up for you today. So yeah, let's just jump right in, I guess. So the campaign is called Vote Better. Here it is on this piece of paper. You can go to Leadnow.ca/votebetter to read more about it, but that's what it's called. And yeah, we're really excited about it. It's been a really long time in the making for Leadnow. For those of you that have been following us for a while, you know that it's something that our community has always really cared about a lot. So what is the purpose of this? Why are we trying to change the voting system? Like, what is so bad about first past the post in the first place, I guess, is probably a good question to start with. Well, I guess there's a couple of things, and I think that those of us who were paying attention during the last election can probably surmise that the electoral system was something that a lot of people were really worried about in the last election. Part of the reason for that is because first past the post leads to false majorities. So, I mean, what I mean by that is that, with the way that our system is set up, so with first past the post, the candidate that wins the most votes in a riding wins the seat. Seems simple enough until you take into account the fact that almost all of the ridings have more than 2 candidates running. So what that means is that it's possible for somebody to win a riding with less than 50% of the popular vote, which is not great. So to give you an example of that, I'll show you a handbill that we were using during the last election to kind of demonstrate what we mean by vote splitting, or what we mean by, false majorities. So you can see this is an example from the riding of London North Centre, and these are the results from the 2011 election. So you can see here that the Conservatives won this race because they won more votes than anybody else. They won 36% of the popular vote, whereas the Liberals got 32 and the NDP got 27. The problem is that if you add all the people together who did not vote Conservative, there's 63% of them. So 63% of people voted for a different party than the one that actually won. So it's not great. So you have an MP that's representing representing, a whole riding, and they only received 36% of the popular vote. So that's not great. And then when you take that up to the federal level, what you have are situations like what happened in 2011, where the conservative government got 39% of the popular vote and ended up getting about 55% of the seats in the House, which in turn meant that they could control the whole legislative agenda. So that was obviously not ideal, not great, and we ended up with 4 years of a conservative government when most Canadians had not voted for that government. So that's what we mean by false majorities. It often, first past the post often results in sort of these outcomes that can sort of overcompensate parties, bigger parties, and lead to parties getting more seats than they should have if you look at how much of the popular vote they received. So, that's not great. And with first past the post, it also, and first past the post just produces so many majority governments as well. That can be a bit of a problem with the way that our system is set up. There's not a ton of checks and balances always on the power of the Prime Minister's office. So if you get somebody in who's not the most democratic, that can be a problem. So we were pretty concerned about that in the last election. And that was a big reason why we ran the Vote Together campaign in 2015, to ask people to vote together across party lines, because we had to with the way that the system was set up. Second reason, and someone I noticed was saying that the paper's maybe a little bit hard to read, so I'll just read it anyway. First past the post wastes millions of votes, millions and millions of votes at each election, not just over time, at each election. In 2015, 9 million votes were cast for candidates that did not win. So 9 million people voted for somebody who didn't end up getting the seat. And so when you add that all up, that's not a great feeling. I know that when I was growing up, I lived in a riding that generally always went to one party. And it wasn't a great feeling to go out at election time and know that you were going to be casting a vote that maybe wouldn't matter, because people would, there's sort of a foregone conclusion, and the party that always won was going to win again. So that doesn't really incentivize people to want to go out and vote. It makes you kind of feel like it's a waste of your time. So 9 million people in 2015 had that experience, which is not great. We want to have a system where people feel like their vote is counting. So another thing about first past the post is that it underrepresents the smaller parties and tends to overrepresent the bigger parties. So, if we want to have a country that has a plurality of voices and a sort of diversity of voices, we want to, encourage more of those voices in the House. Then we want to have a system that isn't sort of set up to kind of favor the biggest two parties. So that's another thing. And then I think the last thing that is interesting is that first past the post can really lead to policy flip-flopping. So what we mean by that is that because, with majority governments, you don't have to compromise with the other parties. You don't have to have consensus. You can, you have these situations where after each election, the party that gets in will spend all their time undoing what the previous party did. So that just means that over time we're going back and forth between different policies, rather than coming up with policies that are kind of agreeable to everybody and that will stand the test of time because they sort of were come to through a consensus or at least a cooperative based approach. So that is something that we're seeing right now. We're seeing the Liberal government kind of spending a lot of time undoing everything that the Harper government did over the last 4 years. So, we want to be actually moving forward. We don't want to be just kind of going back to where we were before. So that is another consideration. All right, we're just checking in here on tech. I know that this is our first time doing this, so I'm just checking in that we're having, some tech issues. I think we're okay though. Okay, all right. So the paper thing isn't working, so we're just gonna cut that out. We're gonna go into now what is PR. So proportional representation is pretty simply a system where it's pretty simple. The share of the votes equals the share of the seats. So 39% of people vote for the Conservatives or for the Liberals, then that party gets 39% of the seats. And that's that. So it's pretty straightforward as an idea. But there are a lot of different ways to get proportional representation. So you can have different types of proportional representation systems, and we're not going to get into those today. Some of them, many of them are used by different countries around the world, and maybe we'll do another session on like how each of those systems work. But what you need to know is that generally speaking, these systems will result in the number of seats that a party gets in the legislature, being reflective of how people voted, which is pretty great. So that is great. So what we would like to see in 2015 is some sort of system, or sorry, in 2019 is some kind of system that has that proportionality involved in it. And why are we calling for that? So a lot of people have been emailing in response to some of our emails over the last few months, asking us why PR? Why is that the system that Leadnow is kind of settled on? And for those of you that have been following us for a long time, you'll know that we've been calling for voting reform for a really long time, and we didn't necessarily come out for a particular system for quite a while. And part of the reason for that is because we're a member-driven organization, and we needed to talk to our members and talk to our community of people who support us and ask them what they think. And they told us pretty loudly and clearly back in March that they want proportional representation. Over 70% of people who we surveyed said that PR was the solution that they think is best for Canada. And that is kind of one of the biggest reasons why we're campaigning for it, because we know that, our community is supportive of that idea. But also more generally speaking, when we've talked to people over the years about the kind of values and things that they think are important in a voting system, proportionality does tend to come out as one of the top values. And that's something that I think a lot of Canadians agree with as well, that they think that proportionality is really important. So that's one of the big reasons. But I think as well, there's other sort of benefits to PR that we can look at as being beneficial to Canada. So there's lots of research that's been done on proportional representation in countries around the world. And what we see are that they tend to have more diversity in their legislatures. They have a better job of, having gender parity, having more women who are who are present in the House, and that they lead to better outcomes on economic indicators, on environmental indicators, and things like that. So that's really great, and that's something that we could really, benefit from in Canada. And we're just like really looking forward to having a government or an electoral system that kind of calls on parties to have to work together across party lines to get things done. So sort of the consensus-based model where parties have to collaborate is something that's really appealing to us. So that's exciting. And those are some of the biggest reasons. So I'm going to stop here, and I see that there's like a lot of questions coming in. So I'm going to just like start flipping through the questions and seeing if I can answer some of them. Also, if anybody is like, hey, she missed something and she did not, mention something that's like really good about PR, then you should just put it in the comments and we will talk about it. I think the biggest reason, one of the things that I remember from Vote Together was going around to different houses and knocking on doors and talking to people about the need to vote together in the last election, and people were saying that they didn't really like having to vote strategically. They didn't want to have to vote for not their first choice. And, they were sort of heartened by the idea that parties were actually talking about changing the voting system. And so we were able to say that, voting for maybe not their first choice this time would mean that they wouldn't have to do it again. And that means that we could actually have elections in 2019 where people can just go out and vote for their first choice and not have to worry about unintended consequences. And I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty cool. So I'm going to just look at some of the questions here. So we've got some tech problems, which is always bound to happen. Okay. Okay, so somebody's saying that the opposition is claiming that some of these changes would be unconstitutional and would require a referendum. Is there any truth to this? I can't speak to the constitutionality of things, not being a constitutional expert myself. I think there's been a lot of discussion about this over the last little while, but it does seem clear that many people believe it's not a requirement. It's not a constitutional issue to change our voting system, and so we are moving ahead under that premise as well. So, are there any other questions about PR or about kind of like why we are supporting PR? I'm seeing a couple of questions about, somebody's made a good point that, who have we got here? So Julian Lamarche, hello, Julian. Thank you for watching. 90% of votes are effective under a proportional system. Plus, since your vote matters no matter where you live, it increases the geographic diversity of the parties. I think that's actually a really great point and something that is really really important. So you have some people that, depending on where they live, can actually be really influential in determining the outcome of an election. So we hear every election about these battleground ridings. So those are ridings where they will flip back and forth between parties in each election, and the parties often need to win those battleground ridings in order to win the entire race, to win the whole election. And so what that means is that the voters in those ridings, who are sort of the swing voters who kind of go back and forth, they get a lot of attention at election time. They get a lot of policies that are kind of aimed at them. Whereas if you're, maybe an NDP voter in a conservative riding in maybe rural Saskatchewan or rural Manitoba, they're not really super worried about you because they know that they don't have a chance of winning that riding. So, it definitely does lead to some impacts on regionalism and on the way that parties develop their policies. So, under a proportional system, that would kind of take away that calculus for parties. So you would have to actually talk to the whole country and talk to those voters in those areas that don't usually get a lot of attention because they're not kind of like the battleground areas. So that's a really great point. Thank you for raising that. So I'm just scrolling here to see what else we've got. So Ali is saying that she thinks proportional representation is really inspiring because it gives hope to all the parties, not just the biggest parties, and I think that's a really good point. It's really interesting to think about what could happen with a proportional system where the parties get the number of votes that they deserve, and also, I mean, with taking away the strategic voting consideration as well, you would probably see a really different outcome in a lot of places. So Michael's asking which country with PR is closest to our own country and would the government simply consult them for advice rather than reinvent the wheel here? I hope so. I think that's a really good idea. And I think that there are so many countries that do have experience with PR that we can look to them for some best practices and learnings. And I know at Leadnow we've already been doing that, looking at particularly the New Zealand example of having introduced MMP about 20 years ago, mixed member proportional representation, about 20 years ago. And obviously Canada is a unique context, and we need to design a system that is unique to our country and our context. But we definitely can learn a lot about, the things like the process of how. I think we may have lost the feed for a minute, but I think it's back now. So we're going to keep going. We can definitely talk to those countries and learn from them. And I hope that that's something that the committee will also engage in is the government committee that's studying voting reform will, reach out to some international experts who have experience in that to actually, find out about how they did it and how they kind of educated the public on it and that kind of stuff. So do we have any other questions? So lots of organizations have come on board for proportionality. So how would you get political parties and organizations to work together on this stuff? And so what are the strengths of Broadbent and Fair Vote and Leadnow that can cover the weaknesses of the others? So just to sort of give you some context as to where that question is coming from, Leadnow is a part of an alliance of organizations called the Every Voter Counts Alliance, which has groups like Fair Vote, who have been working on this issue for a long time, the Broadbent Institute, as well as a lot of women's groups like Equal Voice and the YWCA, various environmental groups. So a pretty diverse range of people and organizations. Guy Giorno, who He's sort of a high-profile conservative. He's also joined the alliance, and it's just a group of organizations and people that really want to see PR for the next election. And the question is just about how we could work better with the parties and work with our own organizations to kind of make PR happen. I think that's an ongoing conversation and something that I'm hoping becomes a bigger thing over the summer. So we know now, part of the problem has been that we didn't have a process until very recently. But a couple weeks ago, we finally saw the motion to create the Electoral Reform Committee, the committee that will study electoral reform. The motion actually went through, so we have a committee now. We don't know exactly how it's going to operate, who will be on it, where they will go, who they will talk to. But we do know that they'll be engaging Canadians over the summer, and that all MPs from all parties are being asked to do consultations in their ridings on electoral reform. So we're really hoping that that the parties will kind of approach this with in kind of a fulsome way and engage Canadians across party lines on the issue, and try to really focus on having a good process that actually engages people in a deep and meaningful way. And if that means that they need to pool resources and work together to do that, then that would be great. If they wanted to partner with community organizations to put those events on, I think that would also be beneficial. I think that sometimes putting on these events can be a big undertaking, and the process of consultation is a big undertaking, even for a government. So I think that as much as we can work together, we will. I know that within the Alliance, we do meet regularly and talk about how we're all working on this issue together and how we can work more on it. So that's something that we will continue to do as well over the summer. So, Abad, hi Abad, I know Abad from Halifax. PR for that, or for that matter, First Past the Post, as it used to be, would be significantly more powerful if we reinstated public financing per vote subsidy. Will this be considered? I think that's a great question. So what Abad is referring to is that the parties used to get a subsidy for the number of votes that they received from the public. So it used to be that even for smaller parties, that even if they didn't win seats, if they still got a certain percentage of the vote, they would get a subsidy from the government. So that would help those small parties to be able to continue, and then would also mean that that there was some incentive for people to still vote for those small parties underneath, even if they knew that they couldn't win, because they knew that it would help them be able to at least recoup their costs for the cost of campaigning. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and something that was taken away during the Harper years that I think we should bring back in. I know that the process of voting reform is not just about the system; it's a wider range of things. So I imagine the committee will be maybe engaging with that as well. So what can we do to ensure that with many parties and likely no majorities, policies and issues can still be addressed in a timely manner and don't get stuck arguing about differences? And I think the remainder of the question is, how do countries with the system learn to cooperate? Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I think it's probably something that we'll have to learn because we've had such an adversarial system for so long, and a system that's really it's winner takes all. That's what First Past the Post is known as. It means that if you win, you get to have all the power, and you don't have to share that power with anybody else. And with PR, that would really change things, and it would mean that we have to work together. So I think that I think that we've seen, like, in the last couple of years, or at least the last couple of months since the new government came in, some interest and willingness towards changing the culture of Parliament. And I hope that if the government is actually interested in fostering more of a collaborative environment in the House of Commons, and is interested in actually improving the tone of debate and kind of the atmosphere that permeates, then maybe the PR is a good way to do that, because if they don't want to keep having to go back to an election every couple of years, they'll have to learn to work together. So yeah, I mean, I don't actually know off the top of my head lessons from other countries on that, but I think that it's definitely maybe a topic for a future conversation we could have about lessons that we can take from other countries. So that's great. Thanks for those questions. I'm going to jump back into what is sort of the content of my presentation right now, and then I'll jump back into questions in a minute. But just really quickly, wanted to tell you a little bit more about what it is that Leadnow is doing on this campaign. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of this call, and for those of you that weren't sort of on the beginning of the call. Today is the 1 year anniversary of the day that the Liberals released their election platform, which makes it the 1 year anniversary of the day that Justin Trudeau made the promise to make every vote count. So we have this opportunity to change the voting system, and our goal with that is basically to get Parliament, to get MPs to vote and pass legislation to introduce a proportional representation system by the next election. So it's very clear, we just want to get some sort of PR system by the next election. And we actually have an opportunity to do that now because the Liberals made this promise to get to change the voting system, and now they are studying it over the summer and fall months. We have a real window of opportunity to do that. So how that's going to happen is that there's a committee, a special committee that's been struck to study voting reform. It has now 5 Liberals, 3 Conservatives, 2 from the NDP, 1 Bloc and 1 Green member, and they will be studying it over the summer and the fall, and then releasing a report at the beginning of December that will make a recommendation on ways to change the voting system. MPs simultaneously will also be consulting in their ridings and have to report back on that in the middle of October. So we can expect to see some town halls and things happening over the summer and fall months. And then once that report is done, we can probably expect there to be legislation introduced in the House at some point next year. So that means that we need the committee. We need, those of us that would like to see PR need to make sure that the committee actually recommends PR on December 1st. And then we need to convince Justin Trudeau to actually introduce legislation to do it. So the Liberals, although they did agree to give the other parties more seats on the committee, which is great and will make that process more fair, they are still the ones that will introduce this legislation. So we need to make sure that we that we remind them that they did make a promise to make every vote count, and that that this is something that is important to Canadians. So how are we going to do that? So Leadnow is working with the Alliance, as I said before, and we are working on basically trying to show MPs and to show the Liberals and Justin Trudeau just how many people want proportional representation in this country, and how many people want, not even for those people that maybe don't know exactly what proportional representation is, there are still thousands of people who just want fair voting. If you show them, those pie charts that I showed you before that just demonstrate how many votes are wasted in every election, and how it's possible for somebody to win a riding with only 36% of the popular vote, you'll see a lot of people be really unhappy with that and agree that we need to have some sort of change. So we need to just communicate to the government that Canadians want there to be fair voting and that they think that proportionality is really important. So part of the way that we're doing that is through the Vote Better campaign. So we have a tool at Leadnow.ca/votebetter that allows people to send messages to Trudeau and Monsef. And over 15,000 people have signed up so far, but we would like thousands more by December 1st, which is when the committee is making the recommendation. So Leadnow.ca/votebetter, we'll put the link in the comments as well, so you can go and visit that. That's a really important way for the government to be getting constant messages from people about the value of fair voting. So if we can just make sure that they're getting this trickle of messages all the time, we can help make sure that we actually get fair voting in 2019. We're also doing some work on the ground in the field. So we're working in Vancouver and Toronto and Kitchener and Winnipeg and maybe some other places over the summer to sign people up at festivals and just kind of where they are in their neighborhoods. Because we know that we can only reach so many people from online, and I think it's really important to get out there and have those conversations about the need to change our voting system. We've been meeting with MPs as well, and we know that our friends at Fair Vote have been very busy meeting with MPs as well over the last couple of months, so really appreciating that. And we're just doing a lot of work on social media to share some content and make sure that people know what is wrong with our voting system now and why proportional representation is a good solution. So that's what is happening. And then what's coming up is that we're doing a lot of work to reach out to young people over the summer and into the fall, getting ready for when students come back in the fall to be able to really plug them into that MP consultation process. With the MP consultation and town hall process, we're going to be working really hard on making sure that our members know exactly where those town halls are and how they can plug into them. We're going to be doing some digital content, some blogs, and some videos, and we're launching a website actually really soon, which is pretty exciting and will be a great resource for people that don't really have maybe a ton of background knowledge on electoral reform, it'll be a great place where people can kind of go and plug in. And those are the big things that are coming up. They are pretty exciting, and we are really lucky to have a really dedicated committee or a community of people behind us on this campaign. I'm always really excited whenever we send out an email or do an action, just to see how many people are really engaged in this issue and are opening our emails and are responding with lots of ideas and excitement. So I'm sure that lots of folks watching are in that category for sure. So that's what's coming up. And so then how can you help? Here's the thing, we actually really don't have that much time left. We have less than 6 months until the committee is going to make a recommendation on voting reform. And that doesn't leave us very much time at all. It's kind of a historic opportunity. It's the first time that we've ever really had an opportunity to change how we vote at the federal level. It's something that people have been talking about for a while, but no parties have really moved forward, and now we have that opportunity, which is amazing. But if we just kind of sit on our hands and hope for the best, then we're not going to get the change that we're looking for. And we really need to make sure that the new system that we replace our old system with is one that is actually addressing those core values that people think are important. So those values like fairness and diversity and collaboration that we hear so often that people want to see more of. We need to make sure that the new system is actually reflecting that. So there's a ton of urgency around this, and we in the Leadnow office here in Toronto, there's only 5 of us. We can only do so much. We need your help, and we need you to do what you can to help us spread this message. So the easiest way to do that is just by going to Leadnow.ca/votebetter, sign the E-to-T and share it with some of your friends. Share the website with people and let them know that taking 20 seconds to sign that message and send it off to Trudeau will actually have a huge impact. The second thing that you can do is you can donate. So Leadnow is mostly member funded. We are so grateful for the donations and the contributions of our community over the years, and they are what allows us to be able to stay independent and be able to run campaigns on whatever issues people think are actually important. So your donations will go towards things like building the website, creating more videos, creating interesting material that we can give out to young people at events over the summer, and just all kinds of like cool creative stuff. We'd love to be able to do more of them. And your contributions would be really, really impactful in that way. The last thing that you can do if you're really, really engaged in this issue is go to we.leadnow.ca. So that's we.leadnow.ca and sign up to volunteer. If you live in Vancouver or Toronto or Kitchener or Winnipeg, we have teams of people that are working on the ground there. We actually have an event this Saturday where people are going to go out and talk about electoral reform. And we know that it's something that might be a little bit intimidating to talk about if you're not feeling like you're an expert on it, but you actually really don't need to be an expert at all. Most people understand intuitively when you show them, those pie charts or those images of the broken voting system. They understand what you're talking about. They know that they've had to vote strategically before, and they don't want to have to do it again. So it's actually often a really enriching and simple conversation. So if you're interested in that, please check out we.leadnow.ca. I'm seeing some questions. I'm sorry, I totally dropped some jargon there. An E-to-T is is an email to target. I meant the email that you send to Trudeau if you go to Leadnow.ca/votebetter. That is what is called an E-to-T, and I apologize for my jargon. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to just see if we have any more questions that are burning. Yeah, so it says, sorry, some of these questions are a little bit long, so I'm just going to see if there's anything short I can answer really quickly. I think there's like a pretty healthy debate going on in the comments. So I am just going to leave it there for now. So you know what? I think we're going to stop here for now. And if you have further questions about proportional representation or anything that I've said so far, you can just put them in the comments, and we will be online later today to answer some of those questions. We will also drop in some really great resources for you to follow up on after the call if you want to dig more into what proportional representation is. And then if you have any other ideas for other topics that you'd love just for the Leadnow staff to chat with you about, we would love to do that. So please put those in the comments as well, or send us an email at Leadnow@Leadnow.ca, and we will try to schedule a time to come and do another live session with you. So that is all from me. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope that this was helpful. If it wasn't helpful, let us know. We'll do our best to work on it for next time. And yeah, I hope you all have a great day, and we're really looking forward to working with you on this campaign. So, bye.